I'm currently working on my Goblin Gunslinger for the new D&D live play campaign I'm joining, and I haven't played in 2-ish years, and I've never played a goblin, so maybe I should take some advice. Ooh, what about this guy? I rarely play rogues, but when I do, I choose between elves and tabaxi. However, once I did play a goblin rogue, sort of as the party's pet, and it turns out a year later, I ended up murdering the party. Quick explanation, you do not touch Squirt's bread. Squirt was my goblin's name, and when we got a manor for our deeds, I got paid in bread, and the party ate it in a food shortage. Hesitantly, I acted upon my flaw. Do not touch my bread. So I assassinated them one by one. Their faces of confusion were priceless. Then they got mad at me when the DM and I revealed that it was me. The campaign was going to end anyway, so I don't feel bad. I think I'll take my inspiration somewhere else. To set the stage, after some wilderness exploration, the party approaches an old orc fort that was recently overrun by lizard men. After some strategic positioning, the party gets into combat with the bad guys. In roughly 6 rounds of combat, the bulk of the party is hurting, and 2/3 of the retainers are dead. These guys are tough, and the party is outnumbered and definitely has the disadvantage in this situation. During this entire time, the player this story is about decides to take a long flank by himself around the side of the fort, self-admittedly not paying attention to the goings-on in the main combat he separated himself from in round 1, and for the entire session leading up to this point. When the party was pulling back, the problem player asks, "Can I tell the party is retreating from where I am?" I reply, "Yes, you can hear their armor clanking from here to where I pinged the party's location on the map." This player then spends his turn getting back to the party as they are dragging an unconscious player behind cover to attempt to revive him. The party is all together. Next round happens and the party wins initiative. This turn, the problem player states that he wants to take a retainer, who was with the party the entire time, directly in the line of fire of the enemies and attempt to hide in the bushes. Meanwhile, the party of 3 with 5 hit points between them decides reasonably to fall back. Naturally, the lizard men take their turns and unleash a volley and miss all but 1 shot that all hit this problem player. I actually gave him a bonus to AC for being in the bushes, but this spear is still connected. He then goes on to fail his poison saving throw, dying of poison as the party continues to flee and leave him for dead. Afterwards, the player becomes very irritated. First, he attempts to argue that the combat was technically over. Everyone was running away, but that doesn't really mean that it's over. It doesn't truly matter. So why would he take poison damage? It was from a failed saving throw, and just because the combat is over doesn't mean the poison just disappears. Then he tried to argue that he moved into peril because he didn't know where the party was because he couldn't see their tokens. Due to him not knowing how to change the direction his character was facing, he forgot how to look around with his character since the last time he played was 4 days ago. At any point in this 30-minute combat, he could have just piped up and asked, "Why can I only see 175 degrees in front of me?" or "How do I rotate my character again?" Note here, we play with a limited field of view. Creatures can literally sneak up behind you. You can rotate at any time, regardless of turn or initiative. He then went on to question why I didn't warn him he was moving into danger, because I usually do so, and especially because I knew he wasn't paying attention. I explained that I do so in exploration encounters while the party is moving carefully and methodically, so no save or die traps because you didn't explicitly say I check the floor for chipwires. I also do this in combat, but only when players ask. Things aren't always immediately clear based on mapping, theater of the mind, etc., and my players always ask, "How tall is this?" or "Can I get cover from this direction?" etc. He refused to take any responsibility for putting his character directly in harm's way, blaming the software, the party, and me, the DM, for his actions, stating, "Why would I run into harm's way if I knew the party was 10 feet behind me in the bush? That's illogical." I was losing my patience at this point, so I told him that even without the visual aids, enough information was presented by myself and the other players to be aware of the combat situation, and that everyone at the table needs to be responsible for asking questions or making clarifications before taking actions with their characters. This is especially true in combat. He again complained that I knew he wasn't paying attention and that I should have held his hand so he couldn't put his character in harm's way. Again, there were no questions or speech to me or his party from him until he died. No attempt to clear up the self-inflicted confusion during the combat. Only after he died was he really paying attention. Later, he accused me of being a bad DM and vindictively going out of my way to punish him by killing his character for not paying attention the entire session. That's appalling. I'd never do something like this. I had ample opportunity to do that if I wanted to multiple times in the campaign, in this combat, and across multiple player characters in the party. I get it, it's hard to give 100% unfaltering concentration for hours on end, and that's not what I'm asking for. This is pretty baffling logic, and a sad lack of sportsmanship and personal responsibility. We'll definitely be inviting this player to future sessions. For clarity, this player was not reduced from max to 0 hit points in one attack. Also, we play a particularly deadly edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Combat being deadly was an expectation I set at the outset of the campaign. It has become a pillar of our game, and we really enjoy that aspect. TLDR, player was self-admittedly not paying attention the entire session, makes the worst possible moves for his character, gets unlucky rolls, and dies because of it. Goes on a mad tantrum and accuses the DM of being vindictive and punishing him for not paying attention in the first place. Player death. The vast majority of the time, player death is very, very difficult to pull off, both for DMs and players. It's hard to make it satisfying. A satisfying end is really important to a story, and when you don't pull it off, it just leaves a bitter taste in the mouths of everyone at the table. This is definitely a case where, yeah, this might not be the end that player had in mind for their character, especially if this is a story-driven campaign. But it doesn't sound like that's what the DM was going for from the outset. Difficult combat is the focus of this campaign, and when you are not paying attention to the game, stuff like that is going to happen. If you think that you can just screw around on your phone or whatever and not die in combat, that's a really dumb expectation. Expecting the DM to handhold you in the dungeon crawler-esque difficult combat campaign because you are not paying attention is an unreasonable expectation to have, especially since in a more combat-oriented campaign, the DM is managing, most likely, much more stuff because of those extra combat elements. Like the DM in the story said, no one should be expecting 100% paying attention at all times. However, if you are in a more difficult combat, then if you aren't paying attention, stuff's going to happen. And that's not the DM's fault, it's not the party's fault, it's not the software's fault, that's your fault for not paying attention. And, well, you need to accept responsibility. It is sportsmanship at the end of the day. Sounds kind of stupid because it's Dungeons & Dragons, but that's what it comes down to. You need to take that loss with at least a little bit of grace, if you know what I mean. And this player definitely had a problem with that. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and you want to let me know, then please do hit that like button. If you want to see more videos from Crispy's Tavern, then please do hit that subscribe button. And finally, if you want to leave your own thoughts, then go down to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.